Welcome to POV, Planning and Organizational Visioning, bringing you insights from experts in planning, sustainability, and organizational management. I'm your host, James Rouse. On today's episode of POV, we have John Shapiro, professor at Pratt Institute's Graduate Center for Planning and the Environment. John was most recently its former chair, and previously a partner in one of the region's most prestigious planning consultancies. He has received over 20 New York City state and national awards and served a stint as the president of the New York Metro chapter of the American Planning Association. John's involved in many pro bono opportunities and considers himself an opinionated New Yorker. Thank you for joining us today, John.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, congratulations on your years running the Pratt Planning Program. You've recently stepped down. Could you talk a little bit about your career arc? You've had a pretty diverse planning career, and it's interesting that you jumped into academia from a fairly successful private planning firm. What drew you to that? What led you up to that point of getting into academia?
Well, I come from a family of teachers. I knew I always wanted to, at some point, jump into academia. I had been asked 2 times before to be the chair, and the timing wasn't right. And this time the timing was right. There were a lot of things that went into it. Some personal. I had health issues on and off.
Yes.
They were particularly acute at that time. Secondly, I was getting angry at the NIMBYism of my work in the suburbs. About 1/3 of my work was in the metro New York tri-state suburbs.
Sure.
And it was just getting harder and harder, even as the things that we were fighting for were becoming more and more feasible.
Yeah, such as?
Downtown revitalization, mixed income housing, attention to resiliency and sustainability. What was happening in the suburbs, particularly in Long Island suburbs, was a sense, the way I put it is, there was the broken promise of the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
The suburbs were built with a lot of federal support, even though it doesn't seem that way at first, because it was never direct subsidies to people. It was always indirect things like mortgage write-offs, building highways, providing federal funding that supported all types of infrastructure. And now it was all coming of age with horrendous traffic and high taxes, and people were just angry. And their anger would then be placed on, well, why do you want to traffic on that street? That might mean I'd have to take 5 minutes more, and I'm already in a traffic jam. Or we should not allow any new housing in the community because the traffic's out of control, or we don't want affordable housing because that might mean school kids and taxes are already too high. So it was very hard to have a rational discussion. Not impossible.
Yeah. I
mean, but crazy things would happen, like amazingly racist things. Tea Party. It was the height of the Tea Party.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a lot of off-putting anger. So that was one reason. And to even have spent this much time describing that one reason gives it more importance than it had. It was maybe only 10% of my decision.
Oh, wow.
But it was also a factor.
Okay. Why Pratt in particular? You said you had been asked a couple of times before and had turned it down, but what kept drawing you back to Pratt?
Well, 2 things. One is Pratt as a program is only about teaching. Okay. It's not about the prestige. So as someone who wanted to be a teacher as opposed to a writer, and was coming in with a practice-based knowledge and interest as opposed to theoretical, of all the planning programs, it suited me the best. But also Pratt is values-based.
Okay.
So it places, all the pedagogy is designed around community and participatory planning. And that's something I actually believe in. So it was a chance to sort of not just make 1/3 of my work about what I believed in, it would be about making all of my work in what I believed in. There's a third factor, which is what I sought to strengthen at Pratt when I got there. If you're taught that planners' main responsibility is for land use and zoning, the only way to achieve public good is through upzoning.
Sure.
And some form of value recapture. And whether that value recapture is the waterfront promenade or affordable housing or a higher design standard, it's all about value recapture. And it's only valid in neighborhoods where you want and can upzone and which have the market demand for upzoning, which means 90% of the city is only interesting. It's not important. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And poor neighborhoods become actually the least interesting. So as someone who is interested in equity, Pratt doesn't emphasize zoning. It in fact emphasizes multidisciplinary approaches. And so you can get into things that affect quality of life and community character, not just the type of buildings and land uses you get.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always felt Pratt, along with Hunter, has led the conversation on in terms of moving more towards the social planning aspect and taking a more comprehensive view. Because as a profession over the years, we've moved more away from the strict technical aspects of planning. We have discussed before doing EISs and reading regulations, setting regulations, but more part of, in the name, like we'll actually plan, we'll working with communities. And definitely there has been that environment fostered here in New York, particularly with Pratt and Hunter, I feel.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So you had mentioned also just recently about health issues and that being a factor as well. In speaking with you, you said you've faced some adversity in life and overcome some difficulties.
So when I was, there's further back, what we've talked about in terms of how actually weirdly learning disabilities have made me a better planner. That's another topic.
Okay.
Just in terms of the health thing, when I was 28 or so, I got run over by a car a couple of times over my chest. There's no logical reason why I'm alive. I spent 6 months in hospitals. And virtually every 4 years since I turned 50, there's been a crisis out of that, some sort of crisis. I'd say the main impact of that is two-part. One is I just have a lot of fun. There's the whole carpe diem thing.
Sure.
Right? The second part of that is it makes me kind of impatient.
Okay.
So here it is, I'm a participatory planner, and I believe in community empowerment, and I certainly believe, we'll maybe talk about it later, something called cross-acceptance, about sharing of power between the top and the bottom. But I get very impatient with processes that delay decision-making. I'm very interested in what's the outcome. Where are we going? What's the real outcome?
So a less bureaucratic approach.
Yeah. It's by the way, I think bureaucracies are great and they're necessary. I'm not anti-bureaucracy. The alternative is chaos.
Sure.
It's more, I see my role in that discussion to be the provocateur.
Okay.
If everyone were provocateurs, this would be a terrible world.
Yeah, everyone antagonizing each other.
Right, exactly.
Trying to change one another.
Exactly. So it's, I recognize that it's just my role in the discussion is to keep asking, well, what's the outcome? How do we get there?
Yeah, structure is definitely important, and it is at the core, part of the core in terms of community and collaborative planning, which you are one of the foremost names in doing so. You've talked a little bit about it so far, but what led you to that type of planning? You
that's where
that's more your nature.
So one is ADD.
Okay.
So if you get bored and restless very fast, consulting was really terrific because while each year might seem pretty much like the year before, after 5 years I was doing very different things, and either the same thing in a different geography or the same geography, and I'm now trusted to do things that are different from what I had been doing before. So by the end of 25 years with my firm and 5 years before with BFJ Planning, which is a great firm, I pretty much have done just about every type of plan that you can imagine. So that was great. The second factor, which is what you and I once discussed and that you've alluded to, is I actually had pretty definitive learning issues growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to read until I was in 5th grade, and a teacher realized that, even unbeknownst to me, that I was faking it.
Wow.
And I didn't know I was. And he said I didn't have to do any homework at all except read a book and write a book report every week. And I remember reading Dr. Seuss in 5th grade, and then by 7th grade reading Camus. And right, it was like the world just opened up to me.
Yeah.
But I also remember thinking that I was broken, that other people could fly. The exact metaphor in my head was other people knew how to fly and I didn't. But if maybe I hung out with smart kids, I could learn how to fly like they do. And so I think that developed a lifelong interest in collaboration. That I don't think I'm the smartest person in the room. My view is I might act that way because I can't stop myself from talking, and I'm opinionated. But my attitude is that there are wildly different types of intelligence. There's analytical, there's creative, there's intuitive, there's social, there's political, and the question there, in addition to different disciplines and different talents, and that if you can somehow recruit all those in the same direction, it's a very powerful combination.
Yeah, and being a planner, there's a unique set of skills and intelligence that helps us. It's based in for a lot of us, certain intrinsic values. As you mentioned, analytical and creative. When I took the GREs for the first time, and there was an analytical section,
right?
That was beyond my capacity to understand. I was like, wait, there's a section for someone who overthinks things, and this is a benefit in terms of getting into grad school, and I did very well on that. So you're absolutely on the mark in that many different kinds of intelligence, and this profession definitely offers different opportunities to showcase that intelligence.
Absolutely, because everything we're trying to work with, unless you are a supreme technician, is about synthesis and systems.
Yes.
So, if you need inputs from loads of different areas, it is one of a number of transdisciplinary fields.
Yes. And that kind of segues into, just in some of your work, how do you deal with diverse stakeholders with lots of different opinions? Not only talking about community residents, developers, elected officials, real estate interests, activists, businesses, etc. It's, as a planner, you need to take that holistic approach, that
right.
powers of 10, just kind of step yourself back a little bit to see how do you feel you've been successful in dealing with different stakeholders? What kind of strategies do you feel are effective? It may not be set strategies, but overall approach.
Again, there's a bunch of things to that. I'll start out by mentioning I'll start out with one that has actually proved the most useful for the work I do in mediation. It's not being judgmental. So there's a personality aspect to this. If you enjoy people, you're less likely to be judgmental. You just I'm interested. I want to know what makes you tick. Why do you say that? But the intellectual side of that is, maybe because I was a history major originally, is the recognition that on the one hand people are complex, and on the other hand, when it comes to what I call their bottom line, the fundamental thing that's in their self-interest, they're very simple. And if you are working with it's never about the individual developer, not in planning. It's never about the individual developer, because if that developer goes away, another one takes his or her place.
Sure.
So it's understanding what developers want, basically. Mm-hmm. What do community people want, basically. Not the whole complexity. What mayors want, basically. And then